Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Father-Son Packers podcast, your source for Packers news, notes, and analysis. My name is Tommy, and I'm one of your hosts, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, my dad, Matt. Dad, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm back home now. You know, last week was coast-to-coast Packers, and now we're all left coast Packers, back to being on the left best
West Coast, best coast. Whatchamacallit? Yeah, so we are here to talk Packers in the same time zone after a week of trying to figure out our schedules. We're here today to start our series on the deep dives of the Packers draft picks. We're going to start today with Brandon Cisse over the next 6 weeks, I guess it is. Normally these go a lot longer, so we'll probably have to fill some more episodes here.
So
smaller
we'll really
draft
be
class
making
than usual.
Some stuff up on the fly this spring.
Maybe we'll just get really into the UDFAs. Just like really deep dive into a few UDFAs.
We'll have a deep dive on every UDFA, like our draft pick. That'll give us another
10 11 episodes, something like that. Yeah, but we'll find a way to fill the time. But yeah, so this is the start of our deep dives. We're going to start with Cisse today, like I said, and go chronologically through the draft picks. We're going to talk about production profile, physical profile, how we see them fitting with the Packers, what scouts had to say about them, what the Packers had to say about them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Kind of just every single facet of the player that we think is worth touching on in terms of looking forward to what they're going to be over the course of their Packers career. We're also today going to talk a little bit about a bit of news that came out. The LVN fifth-year option picked up, what that means for him, what that means for the Packers. So we're going to talk about that. Before we get into any of that, though, just wanted to pitch a couple of things. If you like what you hear, subscribe. Whether that's Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Tell a friend, leave a review, leave a comment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Leave a like. One episode a week for the entire off season. So we'll still be here well after the draft talking about OTAs, mini camp, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, preseason. Yep. And then we'll be doing 2 a week during the season. So keep that
Don't
dial
touch that bat dial.
Exactly. So keep it tuned there. Also follow us on Blue Sky at Father Son Packer for updates on Packers related news, et cetera, et cetera. One-stop shopping, everything Titletown. I think that does it for the spiel, though. So I guess, as I said, we'll go to the aforementioned news and talk a little bit about the main piece of news, which is that Lukas Van Ness had his fifth-year option picked up. This was kind of something that we expected to happen. It's about $13.7 million. It's about the equivalent of the 29th highest paid edge rusher per spot track. In terms of just how you felt about that fifth-year option being picked up, what are your thoughts on that?
I was in favor of it because, frankly, I think getting a starting edge for $13.7 million is a good deal. And it also lets you put off a little bit a big contract. Mm-hmm. And I heard somebody say, well, why don't you make him play under, the pressure of needing a contract to see how it performs? Like, that blows up all the time.
People have Nick Perry.
Right, exactly. So you have this fantastic year, the contract year, and then never again. This will actually, you could say, gives you a better option of seeing if they're really any good by not having them on the contract year.
I think here's the thing is, if he has a really good year this year, you're probably going to get into extension talks this offseason either way. But you'll have that, he won't be going to unrestricted free agency where you have to bid against a bunch of other people. So, yeah, I was in favor as well.
Right.
It's not
or
really
slap
that much
on a franchise tag.
Exactly. It's not that much money in the grand scheme of things. So, it's $13 million for an edge rusher, which is Enigbare got $10 million. And this is more for the, you kind of see. I think the idea is we want to see more. We haven't decided what Lukas Van Ness is yet, and we want to see more. And so I think picking up this option makes sense. Now, the question is, and what I think everyone has been talking about is he was a lot better last year. He just missed a lot of time with that foot injury. And, the team is confident he's going to come back healthy and continue playing well. And I guess the question is, how much better did he play in 2025? Because we talked about going into last off seasons, Lucas, and this was before trading for Micah, where it was okay, Lukas Van Ness has to be a huge part of this pass rush in order for us to be competitive in any way. And we talked about it, in terms of what he did through his first 2 seasons, there were not a lot of success stories of guys who had good careers after having such unproductive seasons as he had. However, in 2025, I think the general consensus is he was better. But I think my question is how much better, and I think you looked at some of the numbers there.
Right. So I have made a kind of combined pass rush productivity performance metric using 11 different measurements, time to sack, time to pressure, get off, true pass set, win rate, productivity, etc. Things like find both NFL Pro and PFF and combine them into a single metric. And so in 2025, out of 148 qualifying edges for this pass rush metric, LVN was the 52nd best pass rusher. So that puts him in the 65th percentile in pass rush performance metrics. And if you think about what you'd expect from an average team, that their edge 1 should be somewhere between 1 and 32, and edge 2 should be somewhere between 33 and 64. So that puts them kind of square in the middle of an edge 2, which is, we've got an edge 1 who was, by comparison, was 4th best in this metric last year. So we have somebody who's like a top edge 1 and maybe middle of the pack edge 2 by this. LVN, however, was an elite run defender. So looking at combining 5 different run D metrics, he was 8th overall amongst the edges last year. So really, really good.
And that's the thing. Even when he was struggling to rush the passer his first 2 years, I felt like his run D was always like pretty good.
Yeah. And so this measurement last year was a huge improvement for LVN. In 2024, he was 97th out of 111, so 13th percentile. And in 2023, he was 23rd percentile. He's gone from being at 23rd and 13th to 65th. That is a big jump. And he actually passed Gary and Enagbare last year. So last year LVN was 52nd, Gary was 67th, and Enagbare was 109th.
Yeah, with the caveat that Van Ness did play far fewer games than those players, so it's a bit of a small sample size thing. But
also that fits with the whole notion of giving him this contract. He was improved. Is it real? Let's get another year to test it out.
Yeah, because he only played 9 games last year, dealing with that foot injury, and there was a couple where it's do those games even count? Because I don't know if you remember, I think it was the game against the Vikings that he came back early, right? And it was he doesn't look right. He only played 6 snaps in that game.
There's one he came back. He shouldn't have been.
Because that's the thing is he came back for that game and they only played him 6 snaps. He didn't look right, and then he missed a few more games and then came back again later in the year against Denver. And so it's almost more like he played really 8 games last year, but he played about half the games last year. And I went back and I looked at, I think it was 16 pressures that he had over the course of the regular and postseason. I went back and watched them all, and I do think that there was a lot more there in the games last year than there had been previously. It felt like previously it was he's going to bull rush, and if he wins with the bull rush, he's going to win, and if he doesn't, he's just going to stand there. And not just stand there. He'll hustle and he'll try and get some cleanup pressures, but he didn't really have anything else. And I do think that there were moments last year, specifically against the Browns, which not the best offensive line, but he was able to win outside a few times. There were it wasn't all one flavor of pass rush. He was able to do a little bit more on top of the fact that he's a plus run defender. I'm totally on board with this. Now, I think it's going to be interesting to watch what he looks like as probably if we think Micah's going to miss or either miss the start of the year or be on a snap count at the start of the year. LVN's probably going to have to be the go-to pass rusher. I guess him, or I guess maybe Wyatt or Hargrave. I guess we'll see. Or maybe Denai Dennis Sutton, ends up just looking insane to start the year. Who knows? Stranger things have happened. Maybe Sorrell takes a step, but LVN's
Brenton Cox.
Maybe Brenton Cox.
In 2024, he was 9th.
I know, but it's another I went back and watched.
Size.
He's he really, really beat up on Seattle and the Saints. That was kind of what it was. But you're not wrong. Because there were other players who had that opportunity to beat up on Seattle and the Saints, and they didn't. So win your matchups. But no, I'm cautiously optimistic for LVN this year. As a person who has been an LVN doubter over the past few years, I am interested to see what he looks like. But there's going to be a lot on his shoulders, especially at the start of the year. But yeah, so I'm interested to watch that. But congrats to LVN for the 5th year option. It was also cool to see I went and watched the stuff they had from rookie minicamp, which we'll talk briefly about in just a second. He was one of the only vets there. He was there. I think I saw Travis Glover and Aaron Banks were also there, but saying hi to the rookies, saying what's up. LVN was talking.
I missed that.
Yeah, LVN was talking to Denai Dennis Sutton. I think actually Jordan Love was there too, because I saw him talking to Jagger Burton. But LVN was there talking to Denai Dennis Sutton and Chris McClellan. So like I thought that was cool, taking on more of a leadership role as he, becomes, as he's been in the league longer. But yeah, so Elvian, any final thoughts on, that, fifth year option getting picked up? I think it makes sense overall.
It makes sense. I think it's worth it. I mean, it's worth the risk because it's.
I think the better question is if he looks good this year, do you extend him, or do you let him play out the fifth year option?
Oh,
that's the question.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I don't know, because I don't know if you can like extend him off of one good year. Like that feels a little dicey. But if he plays well enough where he like is like, we're thinking about like giving him a big time extension, like those are champagne problems. Like if he plays that well, cool, we'll figure that out when we get there. That's like a problem I want to have. I would like the problem of like, hey, how do we pay all these good players? That's a good problem to have. Moving on to some stuff from rookie minicamp, just as a little bit of news. Did have a few tryout players in, including Chase Claypool and Josh Jacobs' younger brother. But according to Bill Huber of SI, the Packers did not sign any of them, so we don't really need to touch too much on that. In terms of stuff from rookie minicamp, Jagger Burton was mostly working at center early, but it sounds like later on they'll try him at like the other guard spots, but he's starting out at center. Chris McClellan had some cool stuff to talk about. Josh Jacobs, I guess, is also like, they're from the same town. They're both from Tulsa. So they they've been like talking about that, which I thought was kind of cool. And there was they asked,
doesn't he have a friend or family member who was a Packers fan?
Apparently his best friend from back home is a Packers fan, McClellan. So that was they were talking about that as well. And he was like, what'd your friend tell you? He said go win. But anyway, Cisse's girlfriend's family are all Packers fans
as well, right? So we got a couple Packers connections in there.
Yeah, but yeah, McClellan. They were asking McClellan's like, so were your guys' high school's rivals? He's like, no, different conferences. So nothing to worry about there. No high school football rivalries. Deny Dennis Sutton had a really cool moment where like before he did the presser, he asked all of the like all the media members' names, and they were joking around with him. They were like, "We're gonna quiz you later." He's like, "Don't worry, I'll be studying." So that was a cool moment. Anything else stand out for you from rookie minicamp?
There's just the thing about LaFleur saying they've changed their approach to rookie minicamp a little bit, because I guess early on they had people like throwing up and getting hurt.
Well, yeah, did Williams get hurt at rookie minicamp, or did he get hurt before it? I guess we don't really know.
We never heard.
Same with Colin Oliver.
Back injury, and then he just didn't show, couldn't do anything the whole rest of the off season or training camp, and the next thing he did was get active. Well, his window opened to come off the pup so he could practice for
just
3
to get
weeks.
some practice reps. Yeah. So
that was it.
Yeah. So unclear if that happened at rookie minicamp, but take it easy. These guys haven't like done real football stuff in who knows how long, as they've mostly been doing like track workouts and stuff like that. So I guess it makes sense. The other small piece of news that's not even really news is that we are finally going to get some Gannon and Acord media availability on Monday. So that'll be something to keep an eye on, where we'll get maybe some information on how Gannon sees the defense, what he thinks about, like in terms of how he's going to change the scheme compared to last year. And then we'll get probably some people asking Acord questions about like, the kicker competition and stuff like that. So that'll be cool to, and Stenovich is going to be interviewed as well, but we've heard from Stenovich a ton of times, so that's not quite as interesting.
Let's hope he doesn't put his
say
foot
something.
In his mouth.
Yeah, insane.
I've been coaching him how not to put his foot in his mouth.
He should.
This is why it's his like mini camp about how to talk in front of the media.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone needs reps. We all need reps. Right. But anyway, any final thoughts on rookie mini camp? I'm trying to think of anything else. Like in terms of like what the players had to say. I mean, we can talk about it when we do the deep dives. I thought, Trey Smack was talking about how he like didn't really get interested in kicking until like late in high school.
He started off as a lacrosse player.
Lacrosse player. Yeah, he wanted to go play lacrosse in college, but then during COVID, they locked up the lacrosse goals, and so he started kicking again. I guess he was already kicking like as like a second thing, but it became his main thing. I'm trying to think if there was anything else that really stood out. We'll touch on them when we get to the deep dives. There'll be plenty of time for that. Let's start talking about Cisse though. Just to introduce Cisse. 52nd pick, corner out of South Carolina. He is from South Carolina. He grew up there. Third-year junior, turns 21 in July. He spent 2 years at NC State and then transferred to South Carolina for his final year. Upon arriving at South Carolina, he made an immediate impression, winning both Defensive Newcomer of the Spring and Co-Special Teams Newcomer of the Spring. So that's a little bit about him. he was like in terms of like he always wanted to go to South Carolina because he was from South Carolina, but he was like a smaller guy when he first came out of high school. He was like a little underweight, and so they didn't like recruit him. And so then NC State, I guess they changed their like some of their coaching staff on the defensive side, and then he was like, well, if they're changing the defensive side and like it's going to be a new staff anyways, I might as well transfer to a higher level of competition and go play in the SEC where South Carolina is, as opposed to the ACC at NC State. So
yeah, it's also interesting that I guess he was a South Carolina fan and not a Clemson fan.
Yeah. Whatchamacallit? I guess that was his team growing up. So yeah, that's a little bit about him. In terms of initial reactions, we already kind of briefly touched on this when we did our overall draft thing, but just as a kind of reminder, how did you feel about the Cisse pick in the moment?
So besides the corners that we had no chance on, like Chris Johnson and Colton Hood, Cisse was the only one I wanted in the second round. And Johnson Hood went 27 and 37. So they weren't the cards. And I felt all the other corners who were kind of available or would go in the second round were either bad fits or were just not good enough. And so for me, if Cisse had not still been there, I would have been, pick another position or trade back and not take a corner there at all.
I felt very similarly. I think of the corners, he was definitely the one I wanted. I think the only question is if you felt like you had to go corner there. He was 45th on the consensus board, so it was like good value per that. And we'll talk a little bit about where some of the, main draft analysts had him ranked. We'll talk about that too a little bit later. But for me, it was like, I was a big fan of him just because, like, I think he is like a special level of twitchy. Like, apparently Dan Brugler had this in The Beast, I think it was, that like he was nicknamed Glitch at South Carolina because he was just so like twitchy. And like you see it when you watch him, like his ability to like stop start like is like pretty special. And I think just like taking a shot on an athlete like that is a very Packers thing to do, and also like a very reasonable thing to do at the 52nd pick. And we'll talk about some of the maybe ups and downs in terms of his actual productivity, but and like his like play at corner. But keeping in mind, he's super young. He's not even 21 yet. Can't even legally drink yet. And he's only played 3 years of college football. And he was also like wide receiver and he was on the Richard Sherman podcast, which I don't know if you watched. It was a really good watch. I would recommend anyone to go check it out because they're talking about like details and stuff. Cisse, like from that interview, you can tell like because there are things in his scouting report from like the people that like whose opinions I really trust, where it's like I don't know if he sees like the route combinations as well as you'd like. Don't know if like he's just reacting and not anticipating. But when you watch him talk to Richard Sherman, like he really seems to get football, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But there's like something where he's like, yeah, I went to NC State and like I thought they were going to have me at receiver, but then they just threw me in the corner room and I was just a corner from then on out. But so like a guy who's really young, a guy who I think still has room to grow at the position, super freaky athletic. We'll talk about that though. In terms of that athleticism though, do you want to start talking about like how he is as a physical like presence, his physical profile, his athletic profile? Because like he's pretty freaky as an athlete.
Yeah, I mean, he has an elite 9.25 RAS. He tested great and or elite in the speed and the jumps with over 95 percentile for the vert and the broad, 88th percentile in the 10-yard split, 91st percentile in the 40. So he's showing elite explosiveness in the 10-yard split and the both jumps. Now, the 20-yard split for some reason was only 73rd percentile. It's weird to like start off elite, slow down a little bit in the middle, be elite at the end again. It's like I don't know what kind of timing they were doing there.
I don't know what's happening there, but okay.
I saw that his 40 time listed either 4.40 or 4.41, depending on where I looked. He was just a little. So for size, he's just kind of barely above average in height and weight, according to RAS and mock draftable. His wingspan is above average, 55th percentile, but he's got below average hand size, 8th percentile. And arm length is only 26th percentile. So
yeah, he's like average. He's like an
guy.
average size, but like slightly below average frame, I would say, is like how I would describe it.
Yeah. And his only agility that he did was below average. The short shuttle of 4.33 seconds gave up
I don't know why he even did the short shuttle.
Why he bothered to add that on?
Like if it was going to be that bad, because I wonder if it's like, did he do the short shuttle and he was going to do the 3-cone and then the short shuttle went so poorly that he was like, never mind, we're not going to do the 3-cone. Or I
wonder
why did he do it? I don't know.
Some guys go out there not knowing what they're going to get. They haven't done it, didn't practice it.
bad process, in my opinion. Like,
right.
But either way,
you got to question somebody's judgment. I have less questions about your short shuttle than I do about your judgment.
But I mean, at the same time, respect to him for like going out and competing and doing it, because a lot of guys would just not even try it. So I guess on the other side of the coin is like, respect to him for like trying to do more stuff. But yeah, the short shuttle wasn't great. I think his agility, like when you watch him, I think sometimes the hip flips not like perfectly fluid, but like I don't think it's like a problem.
But that's not even something you do in the short shuttle.
Exactly, I know. But like in terms of just agility.
Yeah, so I actually feel like the 3-cone is probably more important.
They don't even do like a pure flip,
no,
like hip flip.
You and I were talking the other time about
either.
I wanted to create a new agility drill that
and I was
like, nothing but
no one would do
hips.
that. No one would do it. 0 people would participate. We already have people not doing the ones that exist. But no, yeah. So he's
and I was just add he wasn't in either the Shrine Bowl or the Senior Bowl, so he didn't get any glimpses there from on-field speed. Sometimes the acceleration and deceleration numbers can give you some agility information if they're not doing any agilities, but we didn't have that on him either. We had it for some of the players this year, but not for Cisse.
Yeah, and then the last thing for Cisse, like physically, is he did miss 4 games with a left thumb injury per Dane Brugler in 2024, and then came back and played with a cast on his hand. So that's just something that's to keep in mind in terms of the physical profile. But overall, super freaky athlete, like crazy explosive, really fast with decent size. Like he's not small. He's just not the biggest guy, except for his hands, which are small.
Yeah. And he's not even 21 yet, so he's gonna be packing on some pounds in the next couple of years, just naturally with putting on some muscle maturity. I think he's gonna be he might be within their weight thresholds before the season starts.
Yeah, I think they talked to him at the rookie minicamp about like what weight he played at, and he was like, I think he was like saying he's like at low 190s, I think is what it was. It was what he usually played at, so like he played a little heavier than he tested. But if I remember correctly, don't quote me on that, but I think it was something around there. But yeah, so I think he's going to maybe put on a little more weight to play, but also, I mean, even if he doesn't, I think he's plenty big enough to play to play corner. So
yeah, that 189 is a little low for Packers preferences, but his speed.
Yeah, where does he rank size-wise amongst Packers corners? He's like a little heavier than... Is he heavier than Jair?
No. Jair was 196.
That's so crazy, because I think of Jair as being small. Like I watch it, and I feel like Cisse looks bigger. But I guess
Cisse he's only heavier than 2 of the Packers drafted corners under Gutekunst. Robinson and John Charles at 189.
Both day 3 guys, too.
What?
Both day 3 guys, not guys who are premium picks.
But his speed is better than the Packers draftee average, both for the 40 and the 10-yard split. His jumps are, I think, also, both of them are significantly better. At 41 inches, his vertical is the best of any drafted corner they've had. And his broad is also better than any drafted corner they have. So you can
see the jumps on the field too. You can see the jumps when he's playing, like in terms of how like explosive he is. Yeah, he's probably one of the top athletes they've drafted at the corner position, and one of the faster guys too.
And his height is kind of like right on their average, at just a tiny bit under 6 feet.
Yeah, and then in terms of, I guess we'll move over to production profile and talk about his usage. So the mostly played outside corner, although his first year at NC State, he was primarily a slot corner, so he has some experience there, maybe a little bit of versatility. Not really used much as a blitzer, only 11 pass rush reps over the course of his 3 college seasons, so that wasn't really something he was very much, asked to do. The other interesting thing, though, I thought was at South Carolina, they really rotated their corners a lot. Like, there are games where, he's only playing like half the snaps, like Ole Miss and Texas A&M. Those are the 2 games I watched the most of, were the game against Ole Miss and the game against Texas A&M. Specifically because the game against Texas A&M, it's like you look at Cisse's play-by-play, or like his like week to week like defense grades, and you're like, oh, good. It's like, oh, what happened at A&M where they have him as 4 targets, 3 catches, 138 yards. And I will say, I think that's a little bit deceiving, because so the 3rd catch he gives up goes for 76 yards. And I do think he was going to give up a catch for 16 yards. It was 1st and 20. He's probably going to give up a catch short of the sticks for 16 yards. But for some reason, the way the A&M defenders ran their route, both the receivers ended up on top of each other. And then Cisse's teammate plows through him as the A&M player is catching the ball and like knocks him over, and then the guy runs for another 60 yards.
So those,
it's like,
those 60 yards that are
just not his fault, but he gets them on his record because he was the guy guarding him.
Tanking that game, and also his overall like yards per number.
Yeah, no, because he only gave up over the course of 2025 361 yards, with 138 of those coming in that one game, and 60 of those as yak that I would not qualify that as being his fault. Like, because he was
taken out by a teammate.
He was going to give up 16 yards, but then his teammate takes him out and the guy runs for another 60. And it's like, okay, well, that's not exactly his fault. But anyway, in the Ole Miss and A&M game, I guess just usage wise, he was getting rotated pretty heavily. Like, there are games where he did play like a good chunk of snaps, like against specifically Virginia Tech the first week, he played 70 snaps. But then there are other ones where, like, against LSU, he only played like 26 snaps, which is like a third of the snaps. Against A&M, he only played 28 snaps, which is like a third of the snaps. So they did a pretty like heavy rotation, which is like something to kind of keep an eye on. And it sounds like that's kind of something that more and more like top level programs are having to do in order to keep their 5-star recruits, because otherwise, like, hey, I'm not playing, I'm going to go transfer somewhere else. Like, so I think that's something that's becoming more and more common, but it was just something I found interesting. In terms of looking at last season and how he played at South Carolina, which was like the highest level of competition he faced in terms of like being in the SEC. So we're looking at essentially 532 corners that had at least 100 coverage snaps in 2025. And this data is all per PFF. And just looking at how he ranked, looking at the coverage stuff, some numbers that we like to look at are yards per coverage snap, because that kind of brings in the idea of like, oh, it's good when you're out there but not being targeted. So like yards per target can sometimes be a little bit kind of ambiguous, because hey, let's say you're playing great defense like a ton of the time and you only give up one target because you're absolutely plastering the receiver. Well, if you give up that one target and you give up like 20, 30 yards, like that's going to look bad even though you're playing great defense most of the time. But in terms of yards per coverage snap, he wasn't actually the best in 2025. Now, I will say, I think some of that's a little bit colored by that A&M game where like a third of his yards came in that game. But even if you take that out, he's still like around like, was it like 50th percentile, I think I looked at. So it's still not great overall though, including everything, because like we don't want to just nitpick stats, or like, sorry, cherry pick stats. He did finish like 425th of those 532 in yards per coverage snaps. That was like 20th percentile, which isn't ideal. He was a little bit better in targets per coverage snap at 312, which is like 40th percentile, which kind of does indicate that like when he was giving up catches, he was giving up a decent amount of yards in 2025, which kind of tracks with the fact that he did in 2025 give up 20 yards per reception. So he was giving up some big plays when he did give up catches. He was significantly better in quarterback rating against, like a 65th percentile. And I will say, despite a lot of scouting reports talking about like not the best ball skills, not the best at tracking the ball, which I think kind of comes from the fact that he doesn't have a lot of like ball production in terms of interceptions, only 2 interceptions over the course of his college career. He was 27th in PBUs per target, which was 95th percentile, and 63rd in completion percentage allowed, which was 90th percentile. So he was still getting a lot of pass breakups. It's just he wasn't like catching and like he wasn't creating turnovers, which I think is like the knock on him, but he was still like making plays on the ball.
8th percentile hands.
Yeah, exactly. But he was still
but
making
he's able
plays.
To get his hands on the ball.
Exactly. He was still making plays on the ball. And every year of his career, the completion percentage he allowed went down. So he improved on that every year, which I think is interesting, especially with the, jump in competition in his third year in college. So I think that's interesting. And I think kind of speaks to the fact that like, yeah, he's not getting a lot of picks, but he is still making plays on the ball, which I think does matter. In terms of his run defense, he was 80th percentile in that same group of corners in stop rate. So he was, getting a decent amount of stops, and he was 55th percentile in missed tackle rate. This was, though, his worst year in terms of missed tackle rate, which might be because of the level of competition, might just be a little bit of noise. He was at 14% compared to 3 and 9% the years prior. So he had better years tackling. And I do think there's, that is not nothing, but I figured I'd throw that out there. Anything stand out to you in terms of his production profile? I know I just threw a lot of numbers at you, but I guess the summary is he could have been better in coverage this past year in terms of yards per coverage snap, although I do think there's, something there where maybe it's a little bit noisy. He made plays on the ball, but didn't turn the ball over, and he was a okay tackler this past year, has been better in the past, but, is willing to get in there in the run game.
Yeah, the run defense seems like a good thing. His, I guess the yards per coverage snap could be skewed by about like 80 spots. He
still wouldn't be ranked great even if you took those numbers out. It's still not ideal.
It's still not great. It's a little bit below average. Yeah, for sure. The targets per coverage snap is a little better, and the QB rating against isn't bad.
Yeah,
So
in a lot of ways,
sum all the things together.
In a lot of ways, and what a lot of scouting reports will tell you as well, is you're kind of drafting him for like the player you think he can grow into. I still think he was a good corner in college, but I think he has this like the skill set and the traits to be like a good corner in the NFL. Whereas like as opposed to like if you're a good corner in college, you become like an okay corner in the NFL as opposed to, because it's like, jumping competition. But I do think I'm excited for him. We can talk about the scout stuff, but I do think, the production profile in college is okay, but not great. And there are parts of it that are maybe a little bit concerning, but I do think watching the Ole Miss game and the A&M game, I thought my takeaway was like he is like in phase a lot and like he's there a lot. There are times where like he's not giving up a lot of catches, he's just giving up some big plays. Like the Casey Concepcion got him one time, whereas like he went to press him with one hand and Concepcion just like sidestepped it and stacked him. And then like he got back in phase, but Concepcion had already beaten him. And then the safety couldn't get over fast enough. And then there was another play against A&M where like he has outside leverage on Borkacher, the tight end that went to the Jags in the second round. And like Borkacher just runs like an in-breaking route and he just like is never able to catch up to him. So like, and then he goes for like 20-ish yards. So I do think in the Ole Miss game, I thought was really interesting was he played with a lot of physicality in that game. I was specifically watching that game to see like him match up against Stribling, who like went 33rd to the Niners. And like, I will say like there were like he played with a lot of physicality in the run game, not like letting people block him. I do think there were times where he was maybe a little like got his eyes caught in the backfield where he was like trying to like blow up a screen. And I do think that that's something that he does quite well is attack downhill in the screen game. And like in terms of like beating blockers to the spot. Like I don't think he's not going to like, obviously he's a corner. He's not going to take on like linemen, but he's good at beating them to their spot. I think there was a game against Georgia Tech. I think it was, I could be wrong on that. Don't quote me, where he's able to like, beat the pulling guards to their spot and blow up the play like by going around them. I thought he was able to get off of receivers blocks pretty well. He plays with like good tenacity there. But let's talk a little bit about, that, how he looked in college and talk about those scout quotes. In terms of what scouts had to say about him, I was going to focus on a couple of them. Dane Brugler had him as his 7th corner, 45th overall. 1-year starter at South Carolina, 2-year starter overall. This is a quote. A 1-year starter at South Carolina, Cisse was primarily an outside cornerback in defensive coordinator Clayton White's scheme. He played 2 seasons at NC State before moving to the Gamecocks as a junior. He posted mediocre production, and he was part of a rotation on several 2025 tapes, averaging just 41 defensive snaps per game, which we kind of talked about already. An explosive athlete, Cisse plays with excess burst and speed to fly to the football. He tends to declare his hips early and relies too heavily on his athleticism rather than his technique or anticipation, leading to coverage losses. When he finds the football, he is capable of impressive athletic feats to knock it away, but he needs to be more consistent with his body phasing to shrink catch windows. Despite needing to clean things up in the run game, his downhill toughness is great to see. Cisse is an unrefined, promising cover athlete with the twitched-up movements and speed to become an NFL starter. However, his pro ceiling will be determined by the development of his route recognition and ball skills. He offers inside-outside versatility with special teams gunner upside. End quote. So that's kind of what Brugler had to say about it. Seems pretty similar to like how it felt watching him, right?
Yeah, I mean he's got like some splash plays, aggressive, getting the ball carriers down for like no gain on several plays. He's got great athleticism. I think he's got some good closing ability. To move forward on the ball.
That's the thing. I am a sucker for a defensive back who can click and close, and that was why I was like so hyped about the Darnell Savage pick, which like that didn't go as well as I would have liked.
It looked good in the beginning.
But then it didn't. So hopefully he is better than Darnell Savage. But like I said, I am a sucker for click and close ability, which is like when you put your foot in the ground and break forward.
Seems like it's going to be better than Savage's was.
That's the hope, at least.
At least by the time Savage was finishing up in Green Bay.
Yeah. In terms of Daniel Jeremiah, he had him corner 6, 43rd overall. So both of them had him higher than he ended up going to us. Quote, Cisse is a fast, twitchy cover corner. He primarily lined up outside of South Carolina. He usually played with his back turned to the sideline, allowing him to see through the wideout to the quarterback. He plays with vision, which allows him to use his elite speed to close space and make plays on the ball. He is a loose, fluid athlete. He's not physical in press coverage, though. He carries his hands low and relies on his quick feet to mirror and match. I'd like to see him play with more aggression against the run. He gave up some plays in the games I studied, but it appeared to be more of a focus issue than any physical limitation, end quote. So Jeremiah kind of feels similarly about this. And then the last one I had was just some quotes from a South Carolina coach, Torian Gray, their co-defensive coordinator and defensive backs coach. And this was per Green Bay on SI on Sports Illustrated. Quote, he's always looking on YouTube at clips of guys making plays or doing certain techniques and getting interceptions because he sends a lot of them. I can get texts at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, and hey, this is a guy, Kendall Fuller, making an interception from a 3-step play, or quote, this is what you were talking about out of this particular technique. He's just a real ball junkie. In my, 26 years or however many years I'm going on now, I haven't had a guy to his extreme. I haven't, end quote. So while it does seem like he needs some technical refinement, it does not seem to be an issue of want to. And you can see that in the quotes from the coaches at South Carolina, and you can see that a lot in his interview with Richard Sherman as well.
Yeah, I've heard various reports that he's really I was going to say basketball junkie, football junkie, that he's really, very interested and wants to get better and just study tape. And so you think at some point he'll start picking up a little bit more of anticipation of what to do as he learns players. And
it was really interesting watching him talk to Richard Sherman about technique, because for all the talk in like a lot of the, draft analysis of him, which is like, oh, like, does he really have like the nuances of like route and analyzing routes and knowing what's coming and like having that stuff like, down to a T in terms of like the nuances of playing the position. Like they were talking about like some very detailed stuff, and like him and Richard Sherman were practically like completing each other's sentences. They were like, yeah, like if you have like a 4x1, you feel like, that the backside's going to be a slant. And then Cisse was like, oh yeah. And like, but like, they're going to window dress it and have the back motion out so that when you're in press, you're not going to see it. And then they were talking about like Darrelle Revis, and he's like, Richard Sherman's song was like, when I was playing, like I would look at the bottom of the numbers when I was watching the player. And he's like, but Revis used to look at the knees, he would tell me. And then like Cisse was like, the knees? Who looks at the knees? Like what kind of technique is that? And Richard Sherman's like, I don't know. I guess like when you're Darrelle Revis, you can just do stuff like that. But so like it was like really cool to see them talk about like the nuances of like film prep and like stuff like that, and like the nuances of playing corner. So like it seems like he has like the want to and the knowledge. I think it seems like it's more about like applying that in game, which I guess only time will tell if he's able to do.
Finish each other's sandwiches.
Exactly. What is that? Is that Frozen? I think it might be Frozen.
Who's the villain?
What's we call it? But so that's what scouts had to say about him, and his other South Carolina coaches had to say about him. In terms of what Packers, front office people had to say about him, Gutekunst had, a ton of stuff to say about him. This is all per Packers Wire. They do a really good job of putting a collection of quotes together, which is like great to like see all at once. But Goody said, quote, he's one of the few guys that can play off man, can play press. His suddenness through transition is something that stood out to us. He's very young. We think his best football is ahead of him. We think he's got so much left in the tank, not only as a player, but physically as well. He'll get bigger and stronger. Really like the fact that he took the step and went to South Carolina last year, better competition, and really showed well this past year. He played at a high level, and we think he can help us next year, and we think his upside is really good. He then continued later on. He's almost 6 feet, good length, really good feet, excellent transition quickness. He can run. He's very aggressive and competitive. That's what drew us to him. Started at NC State, was a really good player there, transferred to South Carolina in the SEC and had a really good year there. He's very young, but he's a really good player now with a ton of upside. So a lot of it seems like from the draft analysis to Goody's comments, a lot of talk about upside, but then Goody also mentioned, like, we think he can help us right away. I guess just to, kind of look at it through that lens, how do you see him stacking up in this corner rotation early on?
I think he has a chance to start outside at one of the two outside spots for sure. Where does he stack from the beginning?
I think from the beginning,
maybe number 2.
I think from the beginning he'll be, because we've seen in Green Bay, as much as we always try and like prognosticate, is that the word I'm looking for? We always try and like look to the future for like, oh, this rookie's going to be able to, do this early on. Almost always they start like as the 4th or 5th guy. Like even the best rookies we've had as rookies have been like remember Elton Jenkins, how good he was as a rookie? He was not a starter as a rookie. Like
not in week 1.
Not in week 1.
How many weeks until like Lane Taylor actually got hurt?
It took like 3 weeks. The job. And it was 3 weeks. Everyone could tell Elton was like clearly the best guard on the team. Like it was like, this guy is one of the best interior offensive linemen on the team. He should be playing every snap. And so,
and I think Jair didn't start in the first game. Savage did.
Maybe that's a little bit different, just because I think the Jair one is different because it wasn't LaFleur. So like that's something where I think that's maybe a little bit different, but that's a fair argument. But yeah,
but
so
it is. There's this
Savage
idea
started
that
right away. He was actually one. He actually did start right away.
One of the rare ones. Most of them they make him wait a little bit, even if they're really really good. But they might get the starting job by the end of the year. Maybe even before the halfway mark if they're playing really well.
Yeah, I think early on. Oh, he's also going to wear number 2, which he said is like in some ways because of Charles Woodson, which I guess is like one of his favorite DBs, which every Packers fan loves to hear. So that's good. I was also going to say, I think early on it's going to be Keyshawn on one side and a rotation of Cisse and, either St. Just or Valentine, probably St. Just, because every single year they try and replace Valentine and he just, they always fail to, but I think it'll be Cisse and St. Just early on.
So here's a question. Having seen what happens to all the guys who replaced Valentine, do you want to be put in those shoes?
It's odd. Like it has not gone well so far. Every time,
what kind of voodoo is going on there?
They keep trying to put Stokes in there, and Stokes plays bad. All right, back to Valentine. All right, we sign Hobbs. We try and put Hobbs in there. He plays bad. Okay, back to Valentine.
And gets hurt. And hadn't.
That too.
He goes in to replace him. Has a gnarly injury.
Yeah, but so I think it'll be Cisse rotating with St. Just at corner 2 early on is how I imagine it.
Here's the question. Who do you think the starter is going to be by like the end of the year, by like week 12 and on?
Assuming health, I think it'll be Keyshawn and Cisse. I think ideally, at least, it'll be Keyshawn and Cisse. He'll have earned that spot.
You don't think St. Just has a chance?
He has a chance. I think he would be the next guy up there.
He was better than both Valentine and Keyshawn last year.
Especially in like a heavy zone scheme. Like I think that's the kind of, scheme that St. Just like could thrive in. And I'm excited about that St. Just signing. I don't think enough people are talking about it. I think he played really well last year. And, maybe it was a blip. Maybe it was like, hey, he's more of what he was in Washington. The Chargers thing was at a part-time thing. And, it's just Jesse Minter is able to make most DBs look good because he's such a good coach and Gannon isn't as good a coach as Minter. I think that's totally possible. And so maybe St. Just isn't as good, but I'm still excited to see what he looks like this year.
I would be really excited if by halfway through the year, our starters were St. Just and Cisse.
I am not.
I think Gutekunst would be too.
I think if they play better than Keyshawn, I think that's
what I mean. They play so well.
Yeah, but I think the team loves Keyshawn. And what was it called? That would be an all South Carolina backfield if it was Keyshawn. Yeah. Well, not like or corners at least if it was Keyshawn and Cisse. Yeah, so that's something to keep an eye on. The last Packers quote I wanted to touch on was from Chris Owen, who's a Packers scout, about Cisse. Quote, smart, tough, physical corner, got good foot quickness, can run. A lot to like about him, and he's wired right. That's the biggest thing at the end of the day. Then he went on to say, quote, I thought he had good ball skills. You see the game clips. He attacks the football. He's aggressive with his hand combat, jarring ball loose. Picks are picks, but if you can jar the ball out, not give the receiver a completion, that's what you want. Sometimes you just won't get the opportunities. If you're a good player, they might target the other side, which is kind of what we talked about. He was good at forcing pass breakups. He just wasn't getting a lot of turnovers like during his time at South Carolina and NC State.
Right. And one thing that I've wanted to do, when you're talking about, yards per coverage snap and those things, how much, and I haven't done this at a large scale, adjusting for environment. So if you're on a team where the front seven is just wrecking shop every down,
doesn't hurt.
They can't get passes off. Your yards per target, your yards per coverage snap are look great.
Yeah.
So I wonder if hurt. I've thought about doing a yards per coverage snap
adjusted
compared to your
rush.
teammates. Adjusted for your teammates. How do you compare to the rest of the rest?
Then
of
you
the
get a little bit of noise the other way. Like, what if
it gets to be a small sample size too?
Yeah,
because then you get the problem with that is if you have one guy who's got a flashing red light over his head and they throw at him every single down, it's like, well, yeah, you'll look great because there's just an easier option.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess the final thing on Cisse is just a little bit of special team stuff because, you're a rookie, you're going to play special teams. He didn't do a lot of it in college, but his first year at NC State, he played on kick coverage and on the punt return unit. So he has a little bit of experience in kick coverage. And then his second year at NC State, he played a good chunk on punt coverage and field goal block. And then at South Carolina, he played a very little amount on punt return and field goal block. So he has some experience on kick coverage, punt coverage, and field goal block. I imagine he'll be a gunner early on, or like a depth gunner, and also on kick coverage, to start the year, just because that's usually what rookies have to do. But he does at least have like some experience doing that.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if he's out there on some of the coverage units, maybe like two of the phases.
Yeah,
of special teams.
Gonna need some bodies there for sure, and usually, that's usually what the rookies have to do, at least until they, really prove themselves as starters. Any final thoughts on Cisse before we kind of start wrapping things up here? I guess what's your final, opinion on the pick, opinion on the player after we've done this whole looking at every single like piece of it?
I like the upside. Was he good enough to start from the first half of the year? We'll see. I think the fact that he was played as well as he did as a 20-year-old,
yep,
compared to a lot of the guys that are coming out drafted around him or before and after are like 24, 25 years old. It's like you'd expect them to be better by now.
Yeah.
But because basically the age that he's going to be when he's finishing up his rookie contract.
Exactly. And that's the thing is like you are factoring in some projection of like improvement. So that's not a guarantee. Like we've seen players come into the Packers, probably far too many, where their first year is their best year and then they don't get any better.
It's never better again.
So that's something to, keep in mind. That's like on the table. But I do think love the physical, ability, love the way he approaches the game, love just the twitchiness is undeniable when you watch him, and his ability to stop and start with a receiver and get back in phase with them, I think is like a special trait. And I get that he didn't have a lot of picks, but I still think the pass breakup ball production is pretty impressive. Like we talked about, that was like 90th, 95th percentile. So I think the picks, maybe he'll never be a guy that forces a lot of interceptions, but I think if you're playing good coverage, that's fine. It's still the 52nd pick.
You're getting pass breakups too at a reasonable rate per target.
And that's the thing. It's not even really taking a shot. You are drafting a young, hyper athletic, hyper competitive, good intangibles, young corner at the 52nd pick outside of the top 50 who played in the SEC. I think that's like, I don't see any reason, that shouldn't be the pick. And the only question is if corner, like whether or not corner was the biggest need there or the position that would help the team the most. But I think if you're going to go corner, as I initially felt, I feel the same way after looking at all of this. Yes, you wish the yards per coverage snap were better. Yes, you wish he had more picks. Like, sure. But I think looking at it, I would still make this pick, 100 times out of 100 if you were going corner here.
Yeah, at the position they were in, I didn't like the options for the 52nd pick, really, for the players that were available at other positions. They would have been a little bit of a reach.
Yeah. Well, I was talking about like, do you just go with Deni Dennis Sutton here?
Go with DDS
and they got him in the fourth round, so what do I know?
The dentist, as people are calling him.
Was great nickname. But anyway, so yeah, overall, excited to watch Cisse play in the green and gold. He's going to be wearing number 2, like I said. Going to be, watching him in camp, looking to see if he can earn that starting spot opposite Keyshawn, or I guess if you have your druthers opposite St. Juste. But we'll be keeping track of all of that. Thank you again so much for listening. We'll be doing more deep dives going forward, talking about McClellan next week, which is one I'm really excited to get to because he's probably the guy I had seen the least of this group of players. So don't turn that dial. We'll be back next week with that. Thank you again so much for listening. Once again, follow on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and then follow us on Blue Sky at Father Son Packer. Once again, thank you. And until next time, go Pack, go.
Go Pack, go.